Alright, so let's get this SteamCycle project started. I created the project file. In your guys' folders, there's one folder that I did not create for you in your folder structure. Which one is that?
Premiere.
Your Premiere folder, the one you're going to put your project file. Alright, so make sure you save it there. Let's start by importing the footage. What's the key command for importing? Command I. Now,
do we need to save it with any special formats, or do we just create a new project?
Just create a new project.
And name it SteamCycle?
Yep. Yeah, you're gonna be submitting a link for this. So you'll just give me the URL to your video on YouTube or Vimeo or wherever you post it, Facebook, what have you. All right. Okay, so on my drive, I've got my SteamCycle folder. I'm going to start with just my video folder. Now, I want to just import each one of these as a bin. So I'm going to select the folder because that'll bring it in into a bin in Premiere. So I'm not going to bother selecting individual files. Now, let's talk about frame rates for a second. I shot this footage at 2997, which is a very video-looking frame rate. I was handheld on pretty much all of it. So you could use Premiere's image stabilization plugins to kind of smooth out the motion of the footage. But one of the reasons why I personally, when I was shooting this, shot it at 2997 was because I planned on interpreting the footage at 24 frames a second. Do you guys know what that'll do to the footage?
Slow it down.
It slows it down. So if you take 30 frames and extend that out so that it plays it slower at 24, it's actually about 1/5 slower. So it's not slow motion, but it's just a little bit slower. And because 24 frames a second is a normal frame rate, it's actually the film frame rate that'll play back at the frame rate that I like to watch. So this is where interpreting your footage can create a different visual aesthetic that you're desiring and not to correct a mistake. So in the Monk assignment, the aspect ratio of the pixels were wrong. They were skinny, and we needed them to be interpreted as wide for the widescreen. Now, again, I want to preface this by saying interpreting footage isn't something you do by default. It's only when something looks wrong that you do interpreting footage, or if you shot footage at a really high frame rate and you want to play it back in slow motion. You play it at a slower frame rate. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do here, because you don't have to do this for your assignment. If you like the way the 30 frames a second looks, then go for it. You just need to make sure that your sequence settings always match whatever frame rate your video runs at. Okay.
And that'll make it run at the same speed,
Like
at the shot speed, right?
No, so if I interpret the footage at 24, put it into a 2997 timeline, it's going to have to duplicate frames to make it play back, which makes it have this kind of skipping motion to it. And I wrote into the assignment, if you're going to keep your footage at 2997, make sure 2997 is your frame rate all the way through. If you're going to interpret it at 23976, make sure everything stays 23976 all the way through. Because if you upload it to Vimeo and there's like a skipping motion, then I'll know that somewhere along the lines you mixed your frame rates. Okay. So just to show you, I'm going to select every one of these video files and right-click, select, go to Modify, Interpret Footage. Now, last time we messed with the pixel aspect ratio. We don't need to do that here. Up here at frame rate, it says the frame rate from the file is 2997. I want to assume that the frame rate is 23.976.
Where do you get that number?
That's what the editor, that's a standard frame rate for editing in 24p. You could just say 24 because the footage is still progressive. There's a bunch of math that goes into interpreting interlaced footage, which is 2997, and making it play back at 24 frames a second, which is what 2398 is. 2398 is a field reordering to make the cameras that shoot out at a time code of 2997 play back at 24. There's a lot of math involved, but nice thing for us is the software knows it all, and they take care of making it look right. So you got 2997 and 2398. In Premiere Land, Adobe likes to use 23976. They're just two different ways of saying the same thing. Because if you notice, when I hit enter after typing in 23976, it changed it to 2398. All right. So now if I click OK, what it's done is it changed the frame rate to 23976, therefore slowing the footage down. Now it just plays it back slower. All right. Now what do we do to make sure that our sequence settings are going to be the same as our video? It all starts with creating a sequence from the video. Okay, so we can go in and, we can go to our new sequence and try to figure out which one of these presets is good for our footage. Or we can just say, create a sequence from the footage. Then it'll match. It looks at the footage and says, okay, here's the sequence you need. Voila. So let's do that. I don't want to mess with this, because I could get it wrong in here. The way to do that is right-click on any of these clips and say New Sequence from Clip. Then if I just mouse over this new sequence that just got created, its sequence settings right here, these sequence settings that I'm highlighting right now, they are the same as these sequence settings, or these clip settings. 1920 by 1080, 23976. All right, I just took pictures of those so I could highlight them for you. Now what I would do is take this new sequence that you just created and call it, I'm going to call it, well, you can call it whatever you want to, because eventually it's just going to be a link on YouTube that you're going to send me. So I'm going to call it SteamCycle. And this should be the only sequence you need for this project. So I'm just going to go ahead and drag this to the side so it can be outside my video bin. And there's my SteamCycle project. It's got the one clip in there that created the sequence originally, but this will end up just being my entire video right here. So I'm just going to go over to my timeline and delete that file. And at this point, now listen to what I mean for the whole playing back slower. Our voices are going to sound weird now.
Going to be part of the deck.
No, I sound like this. Okay, so it's not like ultra slow motion, but it's slightly slow. And the reason why I did this is just my hand movements, holding the camera, it just slows them down a little bit to make it look a little smoother. So that's why I shot it that way. All right. So things you're going to need to worry about once you get all your editing done is color correcting this footage. I shot this with a blue colored light in the background, a bright yellow lamp going onto his hand and his face, which if you color correct this a certain way, this light is going to go super blue and this light's going to go pretty orange if you want to correct it that way. Or you can kind of desaturate it to make everything a little more desaturated. I added lots of contrast to this, and I'll show you different color correcting you can do, but definitely don't use the footage in its raw form because it's not as pretty as if you add some contrast to it. Now, when it comes to the sound effects, I would do the sound effects in Audition. Okay, we're going to spend some time in Audition doing sound effects. You could also do your voiceover editing in Audition so that you can use the mastering tools that Audition has to make his voice sound better, or you could do the editing in Premiere. It's up to you guys. A lot of the plugins that are available in Premiere are also available in Audition. In Audition, it's nice though because you can apply an effect to an entire track instead of having to apply it to each individual clip. So that's kind of nice. And then the music file, like I say, you can do a rough edit here in Premiere and then go do your audio mastering in Audition. So what I usually like to do for projects like this is, because it is so driven by the voiceover, it's hard to know what visuals to put in and what timing to put them at. So I'm going to start with the voiceover file and cut the voiceover down to what I want it to be first. Make my voiceover file and then bring that into Premiere and do all my editing against the voiceover. Okay. Then another part, let's see, I'm going to import another folder, and that's these pre-renders. Now take a look at these pre-renders. What is nice about these pre-renders? See that frame rate? They're already the frame rate that I need. So do I need to interpret these? Nope. Because check it out, they're already 1920 by 1080 at 23976. So those are perfect. Don't need to bother with those. We do, however, we are going to go over into Audition and mix all those sound effects over using Audition to give this some life. All right. Let me open up Audition. We'll have some fun in here. Now we touched on Audition a little bit already with recording our voiceover.